All right, welcome back. As we all know, there's been a ton of technological advancements in the recent years that kind of led to an arms race in a number of different areas. And one of those areas that is seen some attention recently is continuous measuring devices. We've seen CGMs, or the continuous glucose monitors. But one other area that's making a recent push is the ability to measure sweat loss on a continuous basis. And this is one that, there's a bit of an arms race here for sure. I know of at least six different devices or units that are trying to do this. Some of them are in production already. Some of them are in beta phase or nearing the launch. And so it's definitely interesting. I've previously looked at the Gatorade Sweat Patch. That one definitely is by no means at risk of becoming the gold standard anytime soon. That left a lot to be desired, but it really wasn't a smart device in any way, shape, or form. And some of the newer devices on the market are really starting to incorporate some AI and also a little bit higher level of tech that hopefully makes them a little bit more accurate as we go along. There was an article that came out in 2022 that talked a lot about this category. It kind of gave a pretty comprehensive overview about some of the challenges that face companies as they try to push these continuous sweat monitoring devices into the market, but also laid out a pretty decent use case for them and need for it. And, I think that's definitely fueled kind of this race that I mentioned a little bit earlier. And one of the devices that I've been playing around with a little bit in this, the last couple of months is the Absolute Sweat device by Liipoo. This is a battery powered device with a disposable plate or patch that you put on, and that patch is what collects which collects the sweat that you obviously lose, and then brings it to the actual device itself for analysis. It does something that a couple of the others aren't currently doing. It not only measures sweat loss at any given rate of time, but it also measures sodium loss, potassium loss, and glucose loss. And the glucose one was a bit of a surprise to me, but I'll circle around with that at the end of the video. But the sodium and potassium obviously make a lot of sense. The ability to accurately measure the amount that we're losing at any given time is certainly an important component of dialing in our race nutrition plan, our training nutrition plan, and also helping us know what we need to be able to replace at the end of any given session, or try to continuously replace throughout the session, if especially if we have a longer workout for the day, or we're going to try to do a second or a third workout on that day. The Absolute Sweat device also has a unique component to it where you can input the own macros of and micros of what you're taking in as a replacement. So like I put in my fast food blend that I'm using to fuel my workouts, and then I could just tap the in-app portion, or I could just tap that anytime I took a drink, and kind of estimate how much I'm taking in, and it kind of gives you a rough estimate of if you're matching your glucose, sodium, potassium loss, if you're falling behind, so on and so forth. So that was, again, a unique component that I haven't seen in all the other ones that I've tested. It may be in some of the others that are coming to market shortly, but the ones that I've tested currently didn't have that at the time, at least. Like I mentioned, it does have an app that it connects to and sends all the data to it via Bluetooth. So you would essentially use your phone or or iPad or something like that during your workout to be able to kind of track everything live. At least as far as I could tell, it doesn't send the information to a head unit or a Garmin or anything like that. Maybe that's something further down the road as it gains a little bit of traction. But for now, the app is fairly well built out, and it does give quite a bit of information and feedback to you as you go. It does also incorporate some AI components into it, into the app. So you can set it to give reminders at any set interval, where it'll actually talk to you to tell you to drink or take influence. But it'll also notice as sweat rate changes, and it'll automatically use that to kind of give you some feedback as well. And then you can track that as you go. Like I noticed that as soon as I started my intervals, I would get more feedback or more reminders to drink from the app. And then when I started my cool down specifically, I would get a lot more because it noticed that I stopped sweating, and that would be a sign that you're starting to get dehydrated. So it started speaking to me a little bit more frequently. So that again was a little bit more than I expected when I was first unboxing the item and first started looking into it. So again, it was a little bit of a nice added surprise. To set the device up, it's pretty self-explanatory. There's instructions on the unit itself and on the patches. Very easy to do. And then you apply the patch to your chest, which makes a little bit of sense because this chart that was listed in the article that I mentioned, and I'll link below as well, but it suggests that the chest is one of the higher sweat loss areas. One thing that was interesting to me was that they have correlated the sweat rate of the forearms to total body sweat loss, right? Like every portion of the body is going to sweat at different rates. And there's been correlation studies done with the forearm. I haven't seen any done specifically with the chest alone. That doesn't mean they don't exist. I just haven't seen them myself personally. But I will say that as I was testing out and playing with this device, every time I would kind of use the old-fashioned weigh in before and weigh out after each workout, and then record the amount of fluids that I took in. And I'm working out indoors throughout the winter primarily, so it was pretty easy to do this and make sure that I'm tracking with pretty good accuracy. And it was always really quite close. Over the 3 and 4 hour sessions that I was doing, it was within a quarter pound in terms of the sweat loss that it was telling me I was having, and then what the scale is actually telling me, which I think is well within the acceptable ranges. I haven't seen an actual validation study on that part with this unit specifically. I haven't seen that with the glucose, the sodium, or the potassium loss as well. Unfortunately, I don't really have the capacity to measure any of those things on my own to test out how accurate the device is. So we've just got to kind of take their word for it with my low quality setup that I have in my basement. It could be something that would be a future study down the road for a college or college or university to take on. But for now, it does provide some really good and interesting feedback. A benefit of it being app driven and have basically firmware that it can update and also patches that it can update. You do buy reusable patches for this, but once you buy the device, you shouldn't have to buy it again. The good thing is that as they further refine or make any changes, they can do a lot of it through changes in the reusable patches or firmware improvements. So the device itself, is kind of just a computer, or a low grade computer, I guess. So they won't have to, if they figure out how to make it better, in theory, you shouldn't have to just buy a new one. You should be able to just update it with the latest firmware, and it should become more and more accurate. Again, I can't really comment on the accuracy of the glucose, sodium and potassium measures that it gives, because I just haven't seen the study, and I wasn't able to do that in the testing that I did in my basement during normal workouts. But if at any point you do decide as a company that, hey, we need to make some adjustments, it should be relatively easy to do from their end, and not force the consumer to make another purchase. As I mentioned before, the glucose measure was a bit of a surprise, but then after looking into it a little bit more and thinking a little bit about why they might do that, there has been a few studies that show that glucose loss in sweat, or measuring that, is actually a pretty good indicator of the stress on the system. And one thing that this does have the capacity of doing is kind of giving you a fatigue score, very similar to what your wearable, like your Garmin watch or your workout tracking software might do. It gives a quantifiable fatigue score, and this will do the same after at least 6 sessions. And there could be some pretty interesting data that come from that, and just to see how well it lines up with some of the other measures, like the fatigue and measure in Training Peaks or on your watch when it says the recovery time after a session. Just having another data point to consider could be quite valuable as well. So my overall thoughts on this: it's a pretty interesting concept. I was pleasantly surprised by a number of things. I would love to be able to see the validation studies on this to come in the future. Unfortunately, wasn't able to review those, so it's hard for me to make initial thoughts on at least the sodium, potassium, and glucose fronts. The weight loss or the sweat rate was pretty accurate from all the testing that I did with it. I also think with some of the AI that they're using, there could be some potential down the road to further enhance that and give better feedback throughout. And again, that should be able to be done just through a normal firmware update. Overall, I think I would struggle a bit to use this in a meaningful way during outdoor sessions, given the fact that I have to have my phone, and I don't really love having my phone with me on runs, or having to hear the prompts from the prompts from the app. You'd have to have headphones in on the bike, and that's not something that I love doing either while I'm riding. But you could certainly wear it and get the feedback and then assess it afterwards, which certainly could be valuable. But I found it very much more usable for indoor sessions, and yeah, it was just a lot easier to use there. I've done a lot of discussions on how to dial in your race day nutrition plan, and sweat rate is kind of one of the starting points. And being able to have a device that can accurately give you your sweat rate over different intensities, that's really important. That can really help you dial in your nutrition plan. Like before, we kind of, I mentioned using the old-fashioned weigh in, weigh out method. Well, that doesn't really tell you, because most of the time when I'm doing that, I'm doing an interval workout. So I'll have, race pace intervals, but I'm not doing the entire session at race pace. And my sweat, I might not start sweating right away because I've got a long warm up, for example. So yeah, I can get how much fluid I lost in the hour and get an estimate, but the ability to get an exact amount that I'm losing during interval sessions is actually quite valuable. And, like I said, I have a fairly decent level of trust in at least that part of this on this device, and hopefully the other components of this are just as accurate as well. So I can definitely see this as another tool to keep in the bag that I'm going to use as I'm starting to dial in the nutrition plan for the first races of the year. And obviously I've talked a lot about having a nutrition plan that matches the demands of the course. Well, I can use this tool again to just help me further refine that more and more. So overall, first impressions were pretty good. I'll keep playing around with it and let you know if I come up with any updates or changes along the way. That's all I've got for you this time. We'll see you at the next one.